can turn the world on with her smile? Who can take a nothing day and suddenly make it all seem worthwhile? Well, it's you, girl, and you should know it. With each glance and every little movement you show it. Love is all around, no need to waste it. You can have the tell, why don't you take it? You're gonna make it after all. You're gonna make it after all.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Real Comia Flynn. I am super excited to see today's guest, the beautiful Patti Austin. I'm so excited. So, the lovely Patti Austin was born to a musician parents, Gordon and Edna Austin. Patti Austin made her stage debut at Harlem's famous Apollo Theater at the age of 3 with her famous godmother, Dinah Washington. At the age of 9, she traveled to Europe with her godfather, none other than Quincy Jones. After a string of successful albums, dozens of compositions recorded by a variety of recording artists, and collaborating with jazz, pop, R&B masters Quincy Jones and Dave Grusin, Austin remains one of the most prolific musical talents of our time. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to stand to your feet and give a raving applause for the beautiful Patti Austin. Hi, Miss Austin. How are you today?
Get up on your feet.
Yeah.
I say lay down right now.
You say lay down?
You're not be ready for anything. You'll already be on the floor.
Right. I love it.
Work our way up from the floor.
I love it. I love it. Listen, I need to tell you happy belated birthday. You just celebrated your birthday not too long ago.
I just turned 71 in August. And I always, it's funny, whenever I hit a new decade, I never feel like I'm in that decade until I'm a year into it.
Right.
So now that I'm 71, I feel 70 because, I got through a year of 70. So now I'm really in my 70s. I'm all up in the 70s.
I love it. I love it. You look fabulous. You look absolutely fabulous.
So freaking blind and kind. Combination I love.
Good. Listen, so we want to dive right in. You started performing at such an early age. Do you remember?
It's funny. I was laughing when you were talking, when you were reading the bio, because every time I hear that bio, I'm pretty soon I'm going to be embryonic, because now I'm 3. No, I was 4. I was 4, people. I was 4. And only one of my parents was a musician, just my dad.
Right, just your father. Just your father.
Mm-hmm. My dad played trombone, an instrument that used to be very popular and no longer is, unless it's, I can't remember, what's the marvelous trombone player's name? Trombone, and his first name is Trombone. Trombone Louis, I can't remember his name. But anyway, he's brilliant, he's magnificent. He's from Narlands and trombone.
Oh, gotcha. Right. Yeah, you got it.
That's the last time I heard a trombone was from Trombone Shorty. But
my dad
was trombone. It was a very, very, very popular instrument, believe it or not.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you had the Dorsey brothers, and one of them played trombone. And so it was a popular instrument. But rock and roll came in, and so all of that went away. And both my parents ended up being psychotherapists. But that's another very, very long story that we will not go into. I'm saving it for the book that I'll never write.
Awesome. And we'll definitely look forward to that as well, for sure. But tell us what it was like performing. Do you recall your first time on stage as a child? Tell us a little bit about that.
It's such a long story. I need some short stories. Can you give me some short stories or Reader's Digest versions of stories in my life? It just takes so long. And when you've been telling this story for 5 years, it's like, okay, here we go. Actually, last year I celebrated my 65th anniversary in show business. So this, just imagine the story that I'm about to tell you, I've been telling for 65 years. So, very long story made a little bit shorter. Used to go with my parents on the weekends to Manhattan. I grew up in a place called Bayshore, Long Island, which is 52 miles out of Manhattan. My parents were very poor. It took them a few years to be able to afford a car, but as soon as they could, they would drive into Manhattan every Sunday because my mom grew up in Harlem and she missed her peeps. So every Sunday we would go to Harlem. We would have a picnic on a big rock in Central Park that, of course, because I was a child, I thought was our personal rock. And we would set up our blanket and do our thing. And then we would go to Abyssinia Baptist Church and hear Adam Clayton Powell, Sr. And we used to go there until Junior took over. And then we would go from there to the Apollo. And this I'm talking about, and I'm talking about the 50s now. We're talking early, like 54, 55 in there, and 53 also. And so, and at the Apollo, they would have 6 shows a day, and we would usually go to the matinee show, and church in the morning, and Mahalia Jackson in the morning, and Dinah Washington in the afternoon. And when my dad was a musician, he had worked with Dinah. And so this one particular Sunday, we saw that she was going to be at the Apollo, so we went. And after she finished her show, we went backstage. And Dinah was so happy to see my dad because they were good buddies when they were on the road together. And he introduced Dinah to my mom. And he said, and this is my daughter. And she leaned over, and she had by the way, at the time, Dinah had a dressing room filled with the most magnificent, what we used to call drag queens that you have ever seen in your life. Because the next night at the Apollo, they had a drag show at the Apollo. What I thought at the time were the most magnificent looking women I had ever seen. And they were all men. They were drag queens. And the Apollo used to have a drag show. I think it was once a week. And they were coming in the next night or the next day. And so they were hanging out in Dinah's dressing room because they adored Dinah. And when we went into the dressing room, she was holding court with all of the queens. And it was... I'd never seen anything so beautiful or magnificent, or they were just fabulous. And I said to my Mom, they're so beautiful. And she said, yes, and they're men. I said, oh, they're the most beautiful men I've ever seen. That was my introduction to the gay community. And and Dinah was, totally adored by that community, and very much, not just loved by them, but she was in with the fellas, She hung out with them on the weekends, and so it was so wild to be a kid and walk in on that situation. But my parents were tremendously hip, and I don't think I was ever in their company where I saw something that might have been an adult situation that they didn't just explain. That's what this is. What is that weird thing those people are smoking? That's called marijuana, and that's something you smoke to do. They would just lay it out true, and usually I'd go like, yeah, okay, fine. Now I know that. Let's move on to the next thing. So it was like that. So Dinah gets up and she walks over to me, and she facetiously says to me, hi, honey, I'm Dinah Washington, and I'm a singer. And all of the guys start cracking up. And she did it to kind of, be cute in front of her friends. But I took it very seriously because I'm a professional. And I said, well, I'm Patti Austin and I'm a singer too. So everybody started laughing. And that insulted me because I was like, hey, work with me. Work with me here. I'm foreign. I'm a singer. Don't mess with me. That's right. You were serious about it. So everybody starts cracking up, and at that point, her musical director was walking past the dressing room door. Her dressing room door was open, and Dinah said, whatever MD's name was, she said, get in here. I got somebody I need you to meet. She says, this is Patti Austin, and she's a singer. And since you're a singer, Patti, you're going to go on the next show, and you're going to sing. And I'm like, okay. And so the MD chimes in. Now they're all putting me on. You know how adults tend to play around with kids, and they'll go like, "Are you married yet?" And they ask all these ridiculous adult questions.
Right.
To have a giggle with a kid. So he said. So everybody's kind of chuckling. He says, "So what do you want to sing?" I said. I thought for a minute. I said, "Teach me tonight." He said, "Oh, really?" And everybody starts laughing again. He said, "What key?" I said, "B flat." Everybody stopped laughing. So then, but that was because I spent all of my time with my dad while he was still playing trombone. He practiced every day. And my parents worked split shifts, so one of them could always be at home with me. So I spent my days with my father listening to him practice trombone and listen to music and write music and do whatever he was doing with music. So that's really where all my musical influence came from. Spending my days with my father, which was a very rare thing to do as a daughter, black or white, in the 50s. You weren't spending a lot of time with your dad because he was usually out working during the day. But my mom worked during the day and my dad worked at night. So
I think that was wonderful. That was wonderful. You had the opportunity to spend time with your dad and the event in the dressing room with Dinah Washington. Now, I was told that John Johnson wrote a story about her.
Well,
is there a little story? Yes. So tell me a little bit of the tea about that story.
The tea about that story is really kind of amazing. So just to finish up quickly, meanwhile back at the Apollo, long story short, she dared me to go on. I went on. The band had rehearsed the song that I was going to sing because it was a song that Dinah sang. They had an arrangement for it, and it was in her key. When I walked out on stage, the musical director forgot to tell them that it was in my key, and so I stopped them and said, "You're in the wrong key," and because all that time I spent with my daddy. And everybody laughed and they played it in the right key and I sang and I knew immediately this is where I belong. And as I ran off the stage, I ran into the arms of a guy on one knee with his arms straight out like this. And he picked me up and he swung me around and he took me out into the hall where my parents were standing in a state of shock. And he said, "Please, can I have her on my show next week? I open next week and please, please." And my parents were like,
Right, I bet, because you were so young.
And they looked at me and said, "Well, would you want to do that?" And I'm like, "Yes, yes, yes." And the guy that was asking was Sammy Davis Jr.
Amazing. So now, do you feel that that's what sparked your interest in singing?
Unfortunately, I was already a ham. I was bad. I would go to the store with my parents, and we used to go to the Woolworths, the local Woolworths in Bayshore and Main Street, because my mom used to make all the clothes, so she would go there to buy fabric and stuff. And she would let me hang out in the toy department while she would go to the fabric department. And there was always music in what they called Muzak at the time.
Oh, yeah, music in the store.
And I knew every song on earth because hanging out with my dad all day.
Right.
And so I would immediately go into, if it was something I recognized, I would just be singing along, all 3 years old of me. That's where I was honing my craft. In Woolworths. And my mom would come to fetch me so she could check out. And there would inevitably be 3 or 4 or 5 people standing around me going, "Oh, she's so cute."
They were enjoying your performance. I love it. So music came naturally for you. Music came naturally for you then.
I didn't really have a choice because my dad was. I grew up in a musical petri dish. My dad was when he wasn't practicing his trombone or scales or whatever, he was listening to some kind of music all day. And I'm talking the most eclectic range of music that you could possibly contemplate. Waking up in the morning to Stravinsky's Firebird, then going into some Patsy Cline, and then you might hear some Mahalia Jackson, then there could be some Miles, maybe a little bit of Bob Dylan, maybe West Side Story, drum and bugle corps, a steel band.
Wow. Wow.
Any kind of frickin' music that anybody
Right.
made. And a lot of the whole relationship with Quincy happened as a result of my relationship with Dinah. And or I should say our family's relationship with Dinah, because
Yeah.
Dinah
What was
helped
that like?
me after I
Yeah.
sang at the
What was that
Apollo.
like? What
What
was that
meaning
like
Quincy?
having Quincy Jones having Quincy Jones as your godfather?
Well,
What is
he had
that like?
absolutely he had no quotations around his name at that time. He was doing arrangements and playing trumpet. And he was
Mm-hmm.
arranging stuff for Dinah, and Dinah wanted us to do a show together, so she took me to his apartment. And my parents and and Dinah went and sang a little bit for him so he could write some arrangements for us to do some songs together, and I could do a couple of songs myself on her next time at the Apollo.
Gotcha.
So, and he was living in a basement apartment with his wife and little baby, who ended up being like my baby sister. And I sang, and he looked at Dinah and he said, "Is she a midget, or is she really a kid? She can't possibly be a kid. A kid doesn't sing like this. That's my goddaughter." He said, "Well, if she's your goddaughter, then she's my goddaughter too." So that's how Quincy
Wow.
became my goddaughter. And so that all of that is going on. Now, where were we going? You had asked me about yes. So Mr. Johnson. So roll the
Mm-hmm.
tape way ahead.
Uh-huh.
And I go to Chicago, and I think it was in the 80s. Just to give you a time frame what the vibe
Mm-hmm.
is. And I was there to do a TV show, some kind of TV show. And if you were black when Mr. Johnson was still alive and you were going to Chicago, you had to go to the building where Johnson Publications were and take the
Gotcha.
tour.
Uh-huh.
If you had any kind of hit record or any kind of recognition and you were black and you were coming to Chicago, it's like they had an underground in Chicago. Ooh,
Oh wow.
so-and-so's coming to town. This is way before the internet.
Right.
You would be in
Right.
a hotel room and you would get this invitation from the air to
Right. From the great gods of music.
go
Gotcha.
to the building.
Right.
So I get this luncheon invitation and I go to the building, and I had met Mr. Johnson prior to that, but it was just
Mm-hmm.
like, how does he even know I'm in town? I'm here to do a little concert and leave. And I walk in the front door, and the elevator doors open. It was just like out of a movie. The doors open and he's standing there, and he grabs me by my hand. He says, "Get in here. I want to talk to you about your godmother." And I'm like, okay. So, as a cub reporter, he was hired to do a piece on Dinah. This is when Dinah was, as they called her at the time, the Queen of the Blues. And she was, I think, I'm trying to remember if What a Difference a Day Made was out at that time. Yes.
Uh-huh.
And so she was gigantic. She was huge. You know, big
Wow.
star.
Right.
And so he had to do this fluff piece on Dinah, and he followed her around for a week. Now, Dinah was very well known for having horrible garbage mouth and being a hard ass. Just really.
Okay. So she liked colorful words. I call them colorful words. Yes.
Very. I like that. I like
Yes,
that. I
colorful
used to
words.
like them my damn self, and
And that's okay.
I find them to be thank you for. I don't trust people that don't curse. That tells me you're mentally constipated.
Right.
I need you to
I love it. I love it.
Yeah, it is. It's just like, oh, I can't say that word. Well, who said you can't say that word? And who decided
Like why?
that word is a horrible thing? And maybe that word has a therapeutic effect. You know, they did a study and found out that the F word has a therapeutic effect.
And that's my favorite word, Patty. That's my favorite word. I tell you, very therapeutic for me. I try not to drop with so many a day. The F bomb.
I dropped many. But you know, it's one of the reasons I love going to Great Britain, because all of those words are just in the daily vocabulary.
Yes.
In England, and I always come back with, you know, I leave with a garbage mouth and I come back with a triple garbage mouth after I go to England for a while.
And it's okay.
If I spend 2 weeks in London, I come back and I'm a hot mess. I'm just like effing and seeing and essing and anywhere, every letter in the alphabet. I got.
But it's okay. It is okay. And I tell you, you look absolutely amazing. I know you've lost weight, and it's funny because I wrote a book. Does your weight make you wait? Do you?
I've heard a rumor about this book, young lady. Tell me everything.
Yes. So my thing is, I wrote the book because trying to get into the industry, plus size women weren't always in style. Let's be very frank about that. Now, if you did
Yeah,
gospel, you were all in, because that's the first thing somebody would say. Do you sing gospel music? And I would say,
or
no.
opera, gospel or
Right, or
opera.
opera, right, right. So
Yeah.
if you were plus size, you were fine with that. But if you were doing anything else, R&B or whatever, not so much so. So do you feel like at the time, because you were always beautiful, like when I was younger, I cut my hair like your hair, like the feathered look on one of your albums. Like
Oh
I
God.
was just that fanatic about it. Like I
Oh my
loved it.
God.
It was beautiful. So I cut my hair just like your hair. I wish I had the picture to show you, but I was just always an avid fan
Well, you
and
look like
listener
you
of
came
your
in the
music.
tribe anyway. You look very, let's get our DNA done to find out what's going on there. Because
Well, thank you. Listen, we'll have to have that conversation offline. But yeah, so I did. I wrote the book about it, and I talked about a lot of times when I went on interviews for, say, if they were looking for extras on set.
right.
I was always the one that could not necessarily go and pull something off the rack. So that was always a situation that whether it was trying to audition for something, even, flying on a flight, people are kind of like, they don't really want to sit next to you. So it was just always an interesting situation.
Yeah.
And even as a child, it was the same way. I was always a little chubby child as well. But do you
Yeah.
feel like being plus size when you were while you're in the industry now, did it have some hindrance on your career?
Well, hell yeah.
So tell us how you really feel,
These are the
Patty.
questions that make old black women laugh,
Yes.
okay?
So tell us how you
RPO,
really feel about
hell
it.
yeah, it was a freaking nightmare. No,
Wow.
I mean,
Tell us.
first of
Tell
all,
my viewers about that.
you're black, you have tits, and you have an opinion, and you have a big mouth, and you have
Mhm.
talent, and it's the
Right.
wrong time for all of that. And you're fat, okay? It's
Okay.
like, please, bitch, please. So yes, it's like 20 times harder, and I wouldn't trade any of it for anything
Hmm.
because it taught me how to be a tough cookie. And boy, has that ever come in handy the last couple of years.
I can only
I
imagine.
mean, really,
Yeah.
this is why I think we see black women now just going through the roof with everything they're doing. Because we've been
Yeah.
in basic training for 400 years. We got
I
this
love
shit down to science. Even the young among us who get to grow up with the old sisters that been in the fight and doing whatever you got to do to get where you got to go and be
right.
10 times better than everybody around you to get there. Uh, when you've got a generation watching you do this,
Hmm.
they grow up to be different kinds of women than we grew up to be because
Right.
they're growing up with a different kind of a woman, with a different kind of power and a different kind of point of view. So yeah, no, it's very difficult. Constantly people saying, if you have such a beautiful face, if you could just lose 25,000 pounds, it would be
Oh
great.
God, if I would
All
hear
the
that story
all
one
the
more damn
nonsense.
time,
All the
it's
nonsense.
horrible.
Getting picked to do a TV show when Oprah was big, and they said, "Well, we've already got Oprah. That's one nigger too many." I mean, that's enough.
I gotcha.
You got 20 white bitches with TV shows, but you can only have one Negro at a time. So,
Wow.
these are the things that go on in this business all the time. Still going on, by the way, hasn't changed yet. Still
That's what
learning
I
how to
was
use
going
the
to
white
ask.
voice. Come over here, baby. You got
Right.
to
And I was
straighten
going
them
to
out.
ask, is it still going on to this very day?
To this very second, and will be going on for another 400 years if we don't improve as a species. It has nothing to
Hmm.
do with race anymore. I'm looking at how long must you drag your knuckles in the dirt before you get your shit together. It's like
Right.
to jump a little ahead of. There's a line in the song that I just wrote about killing the filibuster, and I'm saying it. Could you fix this stuff before my old ass dies? I just want to see this straight for 15 minutes. I did a show where we honored Lena Horne, Eartha Kitt, Dinah, and Natalie Cole. And we had sound bites from them talking about their life as Black female vocalists.
Right.
And Lena said something that was just so heartrending. She said, you know, I've been in the fight from the very first day, and I will be in it until the day I die. But I would love for my grandchildren not to have to do this ever again. I would just like to see it gone before I leave. I probably won't, but boy, would I like to see it get straightened out before I leave.
I tell you,
So
and I love your song too.
You know,
I know, and I love your song. I have to tell you that Georgia, about your voting for me too. I love it.
Well, you know, this is what COVID did to and for me.
Gotcha.
Because before it hit, I was on the road all the time. I mean, my friends teased me all the time. They would call me when they could catch me on the phone and say, "Are you packing or unpacking? What level are you at?" Because I never have these tours that go like from the winter climate and then to the summer climate. My tours are like ding dong, bung, 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 like whack-a-mole.
All over, right?
I do a gig in Hawaii and then the next gig is in Switzerland. And so I always, you know, I'm packing a suitcase with boots and sandals all the time. I said I should have a law firm called Boots and Sandals, because that's ridiculous. So I'm always packing to travel, and I was traveling so much before everything came to a screeching halt. But I did not realize how much of a strain it was becoming. Because traveling, I'd say, in the last 5 years has really become more and more and more stressful, particularly in the States, because our infrastructure has been collapsing. And if you do a lot of travel, you've been able to really see that happening, physically deal with it, you know. And also we've got our weather situations happening. And we have our airplane companies with old fleets that need to be replaced and parts that need to be repaired. And so all that's going on in the 5 years prior to the shutdown. But I'm traveling like I'm 20, and I'm feeling like I'm 20.
That's good though.
Until I get home, and then I'm feeling like I'm 90, and I'm not 90 yet.
But you're traveling again. You're performing, and you're on the road. Are you going to be? A little birdie told me you're going to be in Atlanta soon, right?
Yeah, but not like I was before, because I was like going to Russia for breakfast at one point, you know, and then coming back and then doing a gig in Boston, and then going back to Europe, and then going to Beijing, and then, you know, so just Australia, and then back to the States, and then the Philippines, and so that kind of traveling. And I was finding more and more that the traveling was really stressing me out.
Okay.
Once I got where I was going, I loved what I was doing and the people I was working with, and just everything was great. But getting there became more and more and more and more and more difficult. And we went through a thing, I think, as far as aging is concerned. When you age in Europe, you become a treasure. When you age in America, you become garbage. So what I saw happening in the States was people who were of retirement age were getting kicked out as quickly as possible. They were bringing lots of new blood in, which is a great thing. You have to do that, but you cannot do that without leaving somebody there that knows what the fuck is going on.
Right.
So you have all these companies in the States that have these children doing gigs that they have not a clue about, but they're there because they'll work for half as much and put up with twice as much, and they are able to control them. They don't want to have somebody older there to say, kid, don't do that shit, do this, and then it'll go faster. But so all those people are gone. The lunatics are running the asylum, so that makes our infrastructure crumble even more. You go to Europe, if somebody has been on a job for 20 years, they keep you there for 10. They bring in all the young folks, and they say, you see that guy over there? Go talk to him about everything you need to do. And once they grasp whatever that knowledge and wisdom is, then he can retire. Not a minute before. We don't do that here. So I saw infrastructure issues happening here before I saw them in Europe. But
Mhm.
it's also gotten very service, as we used to call it,
Right.
has changed. And people's perspective about service has changed. And after people got to sit on their ass for a year and a half with COVID, a lot of them said, you know, I ain't going to work on Maggie's Farm no more.
Right. Well, listen, Patti, we're not going to keep you any
Stay
longer.
alive. Stay alive. They're coming. Do you
I
feel
know.
the pressure like I feel it? I'm glad you talked to me today.
I'll tell you. Well, Patti, listen, we're not going to keep you on any longer. I just want to thank you so, so much. It has truly been a pleasure chatting with you. And I know all of my viewers here at the Real Comia Flynn have absolutely enjoyed you. And I'm excited because now I've found another sister that uses colorful words like I do and that
We
absolutely
have to
loves them.
keep our colorful words alive. You keep hope alive and keep cursing alive.
Listen, I
I
love it.
promise that as soon as everything gets squared away, and I
Yes.
promise to do my part, writing songs and marching and doing whatever we can do. And I leave you with this message to anybody who's listening and anybody who likes what it is that I do musically, uh, whether you love me or hate me, please do me this favor. Pay attention to what's going on in our country now. Pay attention to what's going on with our climate now. Pay attention to what's going on with our people now, with our planet now, because
Mhm.
if we pay attention and we pull together, we are about to make a profound change in the way things are done. And it will
You're
be a
absolutely right.
very positive, profound change. If
You're
we
right.
don't, the alternative is going to suck a lot.
Yeah.
And I'm too old, damn it.
Right. You
To
are
go and
young.
live a sucky life before I die. I want to be like, we did it.
I
So
love
let's
it.
just
I love it.
do what we got to do. Stay home, get up, run around, whatever they tell us to do. Let's do
Right.
Simon Says for at least as long as we have to be safe again. It'll
Right.
never be like it was before. So stop talking about that shit. Oh, I want it like it. No, it's going to be different, but it's going to be very, very cool. I promise you.
Wow, I love it. All right. Well, thank you so much for tuning in, everybody, to the Real Comia Flynn, and special thank you to the beautiful Patti Austin. We were so glad to have you on today. Mwah, mwah, mwah,
Thanks,
mwah, mwah.
man. Love you,
We love
sweetheart.
you. Love
Stay
you, sweetie.
gorgeous. Keep
Thank you. You
smiling
too,
and all
darling.
of that fabulousness you
Well, thank you,
exude.
darling.